$1.3 million to fund our expanded mental health unit. So we know that after the George Floyd murder last year, that there have been a lot of calls for changes to how we police. And one of the top issues has been addressing people with mental health issues in a better way. I think we could all agree that mental health should not be criminalized, and that jailing people who do minor bad acts due to mental illness doesn't solve anything. In fact, it actually makes it worse and really exacerbates the problem. And that is something that we have long recognized in the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. We've been making efforts to divert people from the criminal justice system to the mental health system for years. So this isn't anything new for us. But that premise is easier said than done. For a couple of reasons. One of them is that cops are unqualified to diagnose or treat people with mental illness, and the mental health system is underfunded and understaffed, especially in the area of master case management. So better addressing these people with mental health issues, co-occurring disorders, means having qualified mental health professionals, not cops, evaluate the people and participate in the decision-making process as to whether the person needs an involuntary exam and how to get them best into services and keep them out of the jail, keep them out of the criminal justice system. In 2016, recognizing all of that, we started a mental health unit, and we started it by assigning some deputies on a pilot basis, along with some contracted mental health professionals. And the idea was to do what is today the flavor of the day. It wasn't back then, but it is now, a co-response model where you have a deputy responding with a mental health professional. And the premise is that if you have somebody there who is qualified, a mental health professional, along with the deputy who is going to provide all the scene safety and deal with people who are acting violently, et cetera, or may have committed a crime, that you're going to have a better outcome than you would if you just have a deputy responding, because the way deputies solve those situations is the way cops solve a lot of situations. You remove the problem from the situation. You remove the problem from the scene, and that's either putting somebody in jail or Baker acting them. And so many times that is not the right way. That is not the right solution, and it doesn't accomplish anything. And we're really setting up the cops for a lack of success, because we're asking people who are the most called upon and the least qualified to do these assessments and make these decisions. Cops don't have mental health training. You get a couple hours in the police academy. If you're lucky, you went to crisis intervention team training, which is CIT training, which is 40 hours, which is good. But that doesn't make you a mental health professional. That doesn't make you the person that can do a differential diagnosis, that can figure out what's wrong, get the person in the right lane. And frankly, you can, as you're dealing with cops, it's all about what you say. You can talk yourself into a Baker Act, or you can talk yourself out of a Baker Act. And a lot of times it isn't even the right decision. And then when a person gets Baker Acted, is that they go to the receiving facility, they're evaluated. Remember, Baker Act is not treatment, it's an evaluation. And sometime within a couple of hours, up to a maximum of 72 hours, they're going to be released. And the next time they have a touch again is when they're back in crisis again, or somebody thinks they're back in crisis again, and here we go, we're right back on their hamster wheel, and we're really not getting any place. So we tried this pilot in 2016 as a co-response model, and quite honestly, we had a lot of lessons to learn. It was very eye-opening for us, and it really didn't work out. And we had to transition it from a co-response model into a follow-up model or a case management model. And we actually had good success with that, because as the people were Baker Acted, as there were contacts with law enforcement, as opposed to trying to respond at the time it was happening, is that we were following up, because discharge planning was not good, if it existed at all, and people were getting out of the receiving facilities, getting out of care. They were having contacts with law enforcement, but nobody's following up, again, until they're back in crisis. The whole idea is to keep people out of crisis, to keep people out of the system, and to be proactive about it and try and deal with the problems as opposed to just responding to them. So we had some success with that, and we saw that it was working. We had a sergeant, a corporal, and a couple of deputies that we put in there, and those positions were funded. They've been in the budget since 2016. They're funded, and we're going along. In 2018, we recognized that a whole lot of those people really needed more critical case management, not just the case management that the deputy and the mental health counselor could provide on the street by going to their homes and talking to caregivers, talking to family members, trying to get them into services and following up. So the county, Central Florida Behavioral Health, the Sheriff's Office, we formed the Pinellas Integrated Care Alliance, and PICA, as it's called, with a contract through PEMS and some other providers, we now have about 8 counselors that are case managing somewhere around 80 people a month. And that is effective case management. It's working. It has worked since 2018. It is keeping people out of the criminal justice system and keeping people out of the mental health system as far as any inpatient treatment is concerned, because they're getting the right services. So we know that we're having success with the mental health team that's on the street. We know we're having success with PICA. So what we were doing was addressing everything on the back end of the circle, but we still had a void, and we still weren't addressing the front end through a co-response model. So last year, after George Floyd and all the calls and things need to change, again, this is something that we had already known about and that we were already doing and already tried, and we had the back end, but we didn't have the front end of the circle. So I said, let's try again with all the lessons we learned, all the experiences that we had, and let's try again to make the circle complete. Let's put people on the front end. And so we created a pilot area, and the pilot area runs from State Road 580 down to Bel Air Road, everything to the west of US 19, excepting the city of Dunedin. So it's all the unincorporated area. And let's put deputies with mental health counselors, and let's respond to the calls on the front end. So we put that in place. And we also partnered with the city of Clearwater. And Clearwater and Chief Slaughter wanted in on this, and they are fully funding the personnel in the city of Clearwater. So I didn't have any funding for it. So what we did is to take existing positions and temporarily reassign them into the pilot area just to see if we now had learned a lot of lessons and whether this would work. I can tell you the pilot now has been fully up and running for about 3 months, and it's working very well. And now we truly have at least from our contribution, our perspective, a system of care, and that is we have a complete circle. So in the pilot area, if a call comes in, the call takers in the communication center and the 911 call takers have been trained in this, is to assess every call and determine what people are calling about, whether it's juvenile trouble, whether it's a domestic, whatever it is it doesn't involve somebody with mental health issues. And if it does, then the co-responder mental health team responds. So it's a deputy and a licensed mental health professional that will respond, as opposed to the sector deputy. They go out and they assess the situation. They determine whether somebody's in need of services, whether somebody's appropriate for a Baker Act. But the whole goal is to do a better job of not Baker Acting people and to keep them in place, get them services, and then get over to case management. So we have 6 teams that are part of the co-response and 2 teams that are doing follow-up. So if a call comes in today, let's say it's domestic related, they go out and determine that one of the people involved in it has mental health issues. They will make a determination. Does somebody have to be arrested? If they don't, we don't arrest them. Do they absolutely have to be Baker Acted? If they don't, we won't Baker Act them. And we'll leave them in place, and we'll get them follow-up services. The follow-up services can come from the follow-up teams, and then we'll go back out later that day, the next day, continually trying to get them into the right space, and even refer them under the right circumstances to PICA, which is the Integrated Care Alliance and the PIC teams that will provide more long-term case management for these people. So I can tell you that the data shows that over the last 3 months that we have mitigated about 102 situations that otherwise would have resulted in Baker Acts. So it is working. Very confident that we have the right model. Very confident that it is on the right track. To give you an idea as to the staffing, these teams, they work 5 days a week. And it's staffed 16 hours a day, but it's only in the pilot area, and it's only 5 days a week because it's a limited number of personnel that we have temporarily assigned to this. The ask is to make this permanent and to fund these positions that we've added for the co-response model. So again, what we have funded in the mental health unit right now are 4 positions, 2 deputies, 1 corporal, and 1 sergeant. And what we need to add to make this permanent is 4 deputies, the 6 mental health counselors, and 1 clinical supervisor, because the mental health counselors have to be supervised by a licensed person. So that would be the $1.3 million to add those positions so we can make this permanent. I'm confident that we can expand the pilot area. I think the next place that we'll probably move is in the unincorporated area down into High Point and into that area down towards Ulmerton Road, a little bit further probably to the west. But we're going to keep it into the unincorporated area with us for now. Eventually, I think that the model that we have is going to be a viable model to go countywide. And I don't have a time frame for that. We just need to take it slow and see if we can get this up and running on a permanent way. But I know we're on the right track with it. So this model that we're using is a co-response model. It's working well with us and the city of Clearwater. I know in talking to Chief Slaughter that they're seeing good results with what they're doing in the city of Clearwater as well. I think there's an opportunity here to expand it into other partnerships with other cities and gain economies of scale as we were able to expand it. The city of St. Pete is addressing mental health issues, but they're doing it in a different way. They don't have a co-responder model. They have an independent response model, and those are the 2 options that are really out there in the country today with law enforcement. It's either a co-response model or an independent response model, and they're trying that in St. Pete. So it's just a different way of getting to the same place. I personally don't feel comfortable with the independent response model, given the types of calls and the nature of it, but that's not a comment that what St. Pete's doing is not okay. It's fine. It's just there's different philosophies and just different ways of approaching it. So the ask is for that $1.3 million to fund these positions, to keep us on the same path that we're on, to move it forward. I'm not asking for any money in the current fiscal year. We'll continue to just temporarily assign these people, and we just literally took people from their existing positions and moved them over there temporarily. But there's voids in these other places, and they're short in these other places, but I think it's worth it to try this. But I can see from where we are that it's something that we really should be making permanent because because as we all know the adage, you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you always got. If you want it differently and you want a different outcome, you got to do it differently. And I think we've learned a lot over the last 5 years now since we started this in 2016. I think we got the right people with the right model, and we're getting better outcomes.
Commissioner Long had a question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that very articulate way of expressing the need, Sheriff. And I would like to take this opportunity to publicly thank you for your partnership and your assistance in helping us get the Maroney Foundation off the ground, because its total focus has been for this past year to provide those same services you're talking about with regard to mental health to our law enforcement and first responder community. That said, with the awareness that the George Floyd incident has brought to the law enforcement community and the ancillary problems surrounding that that have happened throughout the United States, I'm very worried about and concerned about what that has done to the morale and the overall retention rate with your deputies and your law enforcement folks. And if you are seeing what is it like internally with your folks and how they're dealing with these stories that everyone seems to be so up in arms about?
Yes, unfortunately, we are seeing some effect of it. In fact, last week, we lost 3 deputies that just decided to get out of law enforcement altogether. There is an uptick in people leaving. We are seeing greater attrition rates than what we had seen in the past, and they're not going to other agencies. They're totally getting out of law enforcement. So we are starting to see that. We normally attrit about 4 law enforcement deputies a month. In recent months, we've seen 8 or 10. So it is a concern, and it's just something we're going to have to continue to address, and hopefully by doing some of the things that we are to give them confidence that the community does support law enforcement. I think that overall there's good community support in Pinellas County for law enforcement, and that it is a worthwhile career to stay in. But when I see people that are getting out, and some of them that have left, one's going in this past week going into the food service business, another went into the pest control business, another went and opened a animal kennel business. So people are getting out. They look at it, they weigh it, and say, not worth it. So but we need to keep an eye on that for sure. We're okay right now, but it's also a challenge to hire. And it's not a question of getting applicants, plenty of applicants, but it's good quality applicants is what the challenge is. So it is an issue we're dealing with.
Commissioner Gerard.
Yeah, I guess this all kind of gives me a headache. I love what you're doing, and that you've been willing, and your department's been willing to step up to the plate. I really hate to hear you talking about case management, because I've been hearing for years law enforcement has no business being in the mental health business, but we're getting farther and farther into it. And I guess my first question is, how does it mesh with what we're trying to do on the front end, the whole centralized intake thing, and how, do you really want to go down that rabbit hole, because it's huge?
Well, I think we have to right now. Barry and I have had a lot of discussions about this, and of course I'm aware of what's going on with KPMG and trying to get us here in Pinellas County into a true system of care. I can tell you that Barry and I are very philosophically aligned. We see this the same way. We talk about it a lot. And I think that what we're doing here, and importantly, we've had this discussion. We don't want to and shouldn't invest too much in this. We shouldn't bite off more, because we need to get the economies of scale. We need to make sure it's a system of care, and we need to look for ways that if these people who are doing this function are reducing workloads in other places, then we need to take that into account. But I can tell you that with what I'm asking for here, this is such bare bones that it is that no matter what we do, and that's why I'm not coming to you asking for more than this, because I think we need to see what happens with KPMG, see what happens with a true system of care. We need to see if we ever get to a true receiving facility concept where it's one-stop shopping, where the cop doesn't need to know what the person's problem is, other than there is a problem, get them there, and then let a professional figure it out, and let somebody else. I've said this for a long time, Commissioner, you've heard me say it, and we've talked about this, is that I'm more than willing for somebody else to come in and take this on, but there's nobody standing at the door. So the problem is still ours, and if we don't do it differently in this period of time as we're going down this path, which it takes time, then we're just going to go back to Baker acting the heck out of people and putting people in jail, criminalizing mental health, and we don't want to do that. It's just not right. So I think this is really a very limited investment, a necessary investment that will suit us well in the long term, but it is not overly aggressive, and it's not too much at this juncture, because I'm very aware, and I know the administrator is very aware, that all of this has to come together. It has got to be integrated, and it needs to be part of a master plan.
Yeah, and I think the sheriff's data and his experience in this is going to be critical as we design the KPMG process. Having that, integrated phase to where, because again, even his mental health person that responds out on scene, having them to be able to hook up into an appointment, schedule, get assistance right there, real time, is going to be key. So, we're going to use that, and we're going to integrate them as part of this process and learn from that. And we want the data to talk about the difference. It's a different type of call. So they're an officer's clearing a case, and they're moving on to the next one. You respond to this type of call, you're going to spend more time. So it's not a one-to-one, but certainly there's a drawdown in the overall amount of resources within a particular area. We want to see that data to see how we can also do this efficiently and what that offset is on that. But we'll need time and some data to figure that out.
Commissioner Flowers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff, for your very thorough presentation, and thank you for being present in a number of community conversations, Zooms. We were on a couple together to hear from the community and to move forward with trying to come to a medium about how we handle calls, how we handle mental health issues, and things of that nature overall. So thank you for that. I just want to make sure I'm putting in my notes the correct information. Initially, you were talking about the co-response program back in 2016 when it started. You moved to more of a case manager model. And then when you were wrapping up, you said we're moving forward with the co-response. I just want to make sure that that's the program that we're moving forward with.
Yeah,
or that's the title.
Yeah, so right now I would say it is comprehensive. It is a co-response model that is supported with follow-up teams, that is supported with case management through PICA. And so I think we have really the most comprehensive model possible. And at this juncture, and where all of this should go, though, is to integrate with an overall system of care where it is integrated with the private providers, the community-based providers, and perhaps ultimately some type of a receiving facility. But in the interim, we've got it comprehensive and we've got the circle complete. If we were to end this, we would go back to having nothing other than case management with 2 deputies, a corporal and a sergeant. That's it. We wouldn't have people out there responding to these calls. So the 102 people over the last 3 months that we have not Baker acted because somebody was there to make a better decision, who was qualified to make the decision and said, no, deputy, you don't need to Baker Act this person. This person can stay here. We can get them services and put them with the follow-up teams. Those 102 people would be Baker Acted. Mm-hmm. So I think it's on the right path, on the right track. It's comprehensive, but it's also the tip. And it's a good start to hopefully where we're going as a result of what comes out of the KPMG recommendations.
And you said 4 deputies, 6 mental health clinicians, and I missed the last one.
So you're right. So it's 4 deputies, and it's a total of make sure I got this right. So you have it in 6, and one of them is a clinical supervisor.
Okay.
I want to make sure that
Yeah, it's 6 mental health response specialists, 1 mental health clinical supervisor,
Right.
and 4 assisting control deputies.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
And the
4, 6, and 1.
Okay. I was missing that last, the one
Yeah,
per
yeah.
position. The City of St. Pete using the community assistance liaison piece where they've contracted with Gulf Coast to be the lead agency on that, and then Gulf Coast has contracted with other
Right.
mental health organizations so that an officer on the scene then makes that call, someone comes out and makes the assessment of kind of what's going on, and that there are deliverable services to the person to prevent them from being Baker Acted, because all of that will bring about an additional funding issue for the places of where, which is Windermere or PIMS for younger people where you can Baker Act them. So I think we're moving in the right direction when it comes to what it is that we want to do. Commissioner Gerard, I agree with you when you say, and I think the sheriff thinks the same thing, that police officers, they are not licensed mental health clinicians or clinical social workers. That's not their vitae or their area, and it does take officers off the street from doing whatever they will be doing in their realm. But I do know it's going to take some time to find that sweet spot where there is the right type of response and timely response for persons who are decomping. And how that, we can work some things out so that they are not arrested, placed in jail, only to be released or further detained, which then causes a whole lot of other issues. So I think we're headed in the right direction there. I would love to, I know we have additional meetings to talk about the budget and what we approve or don't approve, but as a part of this, I would love to have at some point some kind of report on numbers, where we are for the number of people we've encountered, the number of repeats that have come back in, because I know that's one thing individuals look for in those calls, is this a repeat person? and, maybe some success stories out of it, who we've been able to transition, maybe find family for them in another state that allows them to go and be with them and, things of that nature. The only other thing, I understood what you said about the helicopters, one being down, needing to replace. I know the question was asked because we're all looking at how we can save some money or whatever, so I know that's why that question was asked. But the only other thing I want to say is it depends on who you talk to when they are using the definition of, and I'm going to say this bad word, defund the police. That is not something I've ever supported. The sheriff has heard me say that. But it's looking for alternatives for things that the police shouldn't really be doing. And so I really appreciate the support in that realm. And I think retention in a number of areas for certain jobs are finding it difficult to hire in some of those positions. So I'm sad that for any officer who decided to become a police officer and then decide that they no longer want to be because of certain circumstances, viewpoints, that's not their dream anymore, because we could always use good people out there to handle people who are doing things that are wrong, and sometimes persons who need that help, that support that's there for them. So those were the questions that I had, just trying to get my head wrapped around the direction and focus that we're going, and how we'll, look at moving forward, moving from a more deputy-oriented thing to maybe deputy first responder, but support and boots on the ground really coming from that clinical component piece. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Seal, I'll get back to you.
Thank you. And, I truly want to thank you and all of your personnel, because you do keep Pinellas safe. And it's, your leadership statewide is well recognized, and we thank you for everything that you do. In our background narrative, it does, though, mention that staffing levels have increased by 68 positions, with 50 positions in law enforcement since 2018. Is that correct?
Well, and some of those are increase in contract city positions where the cities have increased with community policing deputies, traffic positions, et cetera. Some of those are a reclassification of some part-time positions. So yes, the math is correct, but it's not what it looks like as far as, we've had this big, massive increase in the number of positions. There have been some, and some have moved around too, like from different areas due to reorganization. So it depends upon what you're looking at in there. So as an example, we took, there were 10 positions in judicial operations that moved over to law enforcement. That's a move in positions from one area to another area. So I think you really got to peel that back and look at it to figure out what it all means. But it isn't that we've had this big growth in the number of people out there. And again, a lot of it has to do with the contract cities too.
Okay. I know that having attended talking about the mental health initiative, and I tend to echo Commissioner Gerard, but you're filling the vacuum at this point, and hopefully as we finish designing the system, we figure out how the synergies are all going to work together. Are you also encountering or working with the Homeless Leadership Board? I mean, are you encountering a lot of homeless people that you're helping to address? And then are you diverting people from the jail as well so that we could see some savings someplace? I'm just kind of curious.
This last year, as we know, has been different. But, and the reason why I'm laughing is because, we talked about this, and Commissioner Gerard, do you all know how long Safe Harbor's been open now? 11 years. And I'm still waiting from what I said 11 years ago. I won't get in that homeless business. Show me someplace else in the country, and I challenge anybody, show me someplace else in the country where the sheriff of the county is the largest provider of homeless services in that county. I'd get out of the business tomorrow. Should I be in that business? Probably not. Somebody else come do it, but nobody's stepping up. So it's a choice of step up and do it, or we go back to putting people in jail, we go back to 600 on the floor, we go back to criminalizing homelessness and all those other things. So pretty much I would say, Commissioner, as far as Safe Harbor is concerned, as far as homeless is concerned, et cetera, I think unfortunately right now, and we have been for a while, I think we're in a plateau. Some would say stagnant. And the only way that you're going to get any better with that is, again, through services, through case management, through counseling, we're diverting all the people that we can, and getting as many people into Safe Harbor and then getting them into transitional housing, moving them down to Pinellas Hope or to other places and moving them through there. But I would say that it's stagnant. And it goes back to, you got to do it differently to get a different outcome. I know that we made an exponential difference, and we changed it because I saw a huge decline in the jail population. I don't know if you recall, you were here.
I
We had about 3,600 people in the jail back in 2010. We had 600 on the floor. It was a mess, and it was a log jam. And so we opened Safe Harbor. The jail population pretty much immediately went down to 3,200. We got the people off the floor. We're getting them services. We had a lot more services back then. The services at Safe Harbor have declined over the last several years because people who were providing those services pulled out. And why they pull out? Funding, of course. That's what drives everything. So I don't, again, maybe as we explore what's going to come out of the KPMG recommendations, we look at a true system of care. We're trying to integrate, trying to break down the silos, break down all the barriers to make a difference. I think all of it has to be looked at and all of it's on the table. But, in the meantime, it's either we do it or it doesn't get done. And same thing with case management. Should we have, you can have that, we can have a great discussion about it. Should we have deputy sheriffs teamed with counselors who are going out there knocking on doors and case managing people about services, or should, when somebody at PEMS on the Pinellas Integrated Care Alliance, one of those case managers, cannot get in touch with somebody because they need to go to an appointment, etc., should a deputy sheriff be the one that's being called to go out there and find these people and get them so they go to a doctor's appointment? We can have that, but the reality is, if we're not doing it, nobody's doing it. So, I think those are valid points. They really are. And maybe we're at a juncture now with KPMG and where we are and the alignment philosophically, et cetera. I'm optimistic that we can figure out a way to actually make some really dynamic and systematic changes here in Pinellas County, and that we don't just do what we've done, which is temporary fixes, Band-Aids. And so I hear you. You're right. But if we don't do it, who's doing it? And like in St. Pete, and Commissioner Flowers knows, in her district down there, is that what does Central Ave look like? What did downtown St. Pete look like before we opened Safe Harbor? It wasn't good. And so, yeah.
And I don't disagree. I said,
Yeah.
you're coming into the vacuum.
Right.
And
right.
so.
No, I know, and I appreciate the comments. And like I said, we can have some really good, dialogue about it. And it's an absolutely legitimate question: is should we be doing it? Mm-hmm. And the answer to it is probably no. But until somebody else, until the void is filled, here we are.
Yeah. The only other question I had was, I know you mentioned that law enforcement gets very little mental health training. I remember NAMI, I believe, was doing, trying to get into more education for the officers. Are they still playing that role?
Yeah, CIT, which is with NAMI,
Yeah.
the Crisis Intervention Team training. And we were able to, and I was able to talk to them because, again, it goes also to attrition. So the problem is that you don't get it in the police academy, you don't get it in basic training, you send the officers and the deputies to CIT training. So we were at a point, years ago where we had a lot of deputies that were CIT trained. But as they leave and we have attrition, then I think last year when we looked at it, now we're doing more and more classes. I got with them and told them we need to be more robust with this. We need to offer more classes. Of our patrol deputies, we only had like 23% that were CIT trained. And it was a challenge because they were only doing like one class a year. And so at one class a year, and we only had 10 seats in the class. St. Pete got seats, we got seats, Clearwater got seats, other ones. And when you're only doing one or two, you can never catch up. So I talked to them and said, we got to do something differently. So we're now doing, and we just started it here a couple months ago, we're now doing one class a month with 30 people in a class. But that 30 people is for us, St. Pete, Clearwater, Largo, everybody else. And we're not the only ones. I know I talked to Chief Holloway about it. He's in the same boat where they have, through attrition, they don't have enough people that are CIT. So he's getting a lot of people in as well. Clearwater, from talking to Chief Slaughter, they're in good shape, or in better shape than we are. But we are way under-trained. But with working with the providers of the CIT training, we're now getting the classes, and we'll try and play catch-up. But it's probably going to take a year or two to get us back where we were before.
And just one final comment. I already said thank you, but I want to also emphasize how much we appreciated everything that you and your teams did during COVID. I mean, we could not have made it through everything that we encountered without all of your leadership and everyone else's help.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that our personnel will appreciate the comments and thoughts. It was truly a team effort, and that's not a cliche. It really was. Is that the level of cooperation, collaboration, teamwork by so many people here in Pinellas County was a model about how government should work.
Yeah, thank you for that last comment. I had that on my notes to say, so I don't need to do that. But it really has been unbelievable to work. Barry's group, your group, all the different groups, Dr. Cho's group, trying to pull this thing together this past year. Unbelievable. And thank you for your leadership on that. And thank you for being there for an enforcement arm during this past year, but also not taking it to the point of making it more debilitating for these businesses than they're already experiencing. So we put it out there, educational, we talked to a lot of people, we tried to get people on board, but we didn't go overboard at all with the penalizing businesses that were already suffering. So you guys did a great job, and appreciate that as well. Any other questions or comments? Sheriff, the numbers that I see on page 1 of 4 that talk about 24-21 this year, 24-21 in the budget request, does that include the asks, or would that be additional?
Which
Page 1 of 4, where you talk about the staffing summaries.
And no, the decision packages are outside of.
Okay, so that
those
would be
numbers.
additional, so those 16 additional positions takes it to 2437 or whatever. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Yes, they're not, the new positions are not what's in the submitted
Okay.
budget, if that's.
I got you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got you.
So it's, the new positions are the Marine unit positions and the mental health unit.
That's correct. Yep. And so when I summarize that, that'll be in my budget recommendation when we
Okay.
figure out exactly, what we're recommending.
So when it's on target for with OMB's numbers, is that,
No. His budget, so he receives a target for
Right.
the sheriff's office. They have submitted a budget within that target, and then these are requests from the sheriff's office for in addition to that target.
all right.
And so I'm going to look at all the decision packages and make one budget submittal and recommendation at that time.
okay, thank you, appreciate that. Yes, Commissioner Long?
I'm not going to keep us, but I just wanted to say thank you as well, Sheriff, for the deputies that you've provided us during the meetings that we've been having over this past year. It's been an extraordinary mission for them, and I'm grateful. So thank you.
Anybody else for the sheriff? Okay, all right, thank you, Bob, appreciate it.
Thank you, appreciate
Yep.
it, thanks.
Thank you. And the sheriff will be here next Tuesday also.